Welcome, everybody, to this 5-year celebration live stream, if you will. 5 years ago today, we launched into missions full time. We were on a plane 5 years ago. I think we made it as far as Iceland on the 18th, and then on the 19th, we landed in Norway. And we had been fundraising before that, but that was the start of our journey in missions with YWAM, Youth with a Mission. And a question that I want to talk about tonight is, what's the fruit of the last 5 years? Like, what have we accomplished? What has happened as a result of us being in missions? And as I was preparing for this video, I actually had a breakthrough. I had a sort of a revelation in understanding what this question entails, how to answer this question of fruitfulness. And to be honest, it's actually been a weight off my shoulders. I had this breakthrough when I was preparing for this video on Tuesday. I've always wanted to be a missionary. I've wanted to be a really successful and fruitful missionary. And I've always wanted to go overseas. I've always wanted to see people come to Christ, be a part of God's story of what He's doing. I was always inspired by the calls to missions, the calls to lay your life down to go all in for Jesus. And 5 years ago, I was stepping out into this place of actually being able to live that out, to do that dream of being a part of the move of God in missions. And I have had a lot of mixed feelings and a lot of wrestling over that reality. I mean, I didn't realize at the time, but just because you leave your home country, just because you raise support or join a missions organization, doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're going to see all those things just start happening. And you realize in those stories that there's a long journey, a long process to that fruit after you've been on a long process of frustration around that. And we have had fruit, and honestly, that was a bit of what God was highlighting to me, was that I was looking at the last 5 years all wrong. And I've been wrestling with this. I haven't been totally frowning upon the last 5 years, but I have been sort of like mixed about it. Part of me feels like, have we accomplished enough? Have we seen enough people come to Christ? Have we seen enough lives changed? Even the work that God's called us into with media, like, how successful or fruitful has that been? Should that have been? Anyway, and actually, Tasha's here now. She's going to join for this conversation a little bit. Let me turn your mic on for you. Welcome.
Hi.
To our 0 viewers, but we'll have people that watch this after.
The lighting is really bright.
I need to turn it a little bit more this way so you can get in there too.
Is it supposed to be that bright?
Yeah. You feel too bright?
Feel really bright.
So, looking back over the last 5 years, I've been, I think, wrestling with, have we been fruitful enough? And that question has been hard to answer because, like, how do we know what fruit is? How do we know what's worked, what hasn't worked? And there's a lot of stuff that you sow into that you don't get fruit right away. And so I was sharing, I'm in the prayer room this week with Benjamin, and I felt like I was just asking God about this video, and I was like, what do I say on this video? What do I say about the last 5 years? Like, what is the fruit of the last 5 years? And I felt like God said, share stories of my faithfulness. Share stories of how I have been faithful to you guys these past 5 years. And I was like, okay, well, what stories are that? And he started to share some stories, and I'm going to share them with you here in a minute. And as I was looking, I was like, I could downplay those stories, or I could say, oh, well, I don't know if that was really us, or I don't know if that was just, you can downplay those stories. And so I started to wrestle with the Lord on that. And I felt like he said, you're judging my plan for you guys in missions. You're judging what I'm doing with you guys in missions. And like, that's the fear of man. Like, you are wanting this to look a certain way for supporters. You're wanting this to look a certain way for yourself. You want to be seen as successful. You want to be seen as fruitful, and you're judging what I'm doing. And the reality is that what I have done is good and is fruitful, and it's my faithfulness that's led you there. And what's interesting is we've walked in faith. Like, our journey is saying, God, what do you want us to do?
And the only answer to him is yes.
Yeah. I'm going to turn the light down a little bit.
You don't want to.
You think it's a little bright?
It is. It's really bright.
I'll turn it down.
I have paler skin and hair than you.
Well, you're also sitting directly under the light. I was sitting kind of off light a little bit.
That might be why too.
Is that better?
Mm-hmm.
You're also a little further from the camera. You can scoot over here, sit next to me. So, we might have like a kid interruption. Our kids, 2 of them are in the backyard, 2 of them are upstairs.
They're in bed, but they're not asleep.
What have you been doing this week?
First week of homeschooling for this year.
How's that going?
Up and down. Has its good moments and it has its.
It's a hard thing,
moments.
Transition, and you're now doing 3 kids.
Yeah, 3 different grades. Kindergarten isn't that hard, but
you're teaching Avi how to read.
I'm teaching how to read.
That's, I would say, a pretty significant task. So I had to repent to the Lord and be like, okay, God, you're right. I've been saying yes to you in obedience to what you've said to us to do, but then I've been standing back and being like, this doesn't look as good as it could be, or man, I would prefer to see more of this or more of that, or look more like a missionary. And the reality is that God has shown us himself faithful, and he started to remind me of some stories of that. And I
don't know what you're going to share.
You can follow my notes here if you want, but I'll read it. It was like, Lord, what do I share? Like, what do I say we've done? And I felt like he said, report about the prayers for renewed engagement in missions at your base in Norway. And there, while we were there, pretty early on, there were teams that came from YWAM and Kona, from a group called Fire and Fragrance. And seeing these groups come on the base, it was like, oh man, this is exciting. These guys are excited about evangelism. They're excited about going out and preaching the gospel. They're believing for miracles and prophetic words.
They had a lot of faith. And
a
lot of energy for sure.
And our base was at a down year. I remember talking to the base leader about this, and it was just, they had lost some leadership, and we didn't realize it when we first got there, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes of the base and a lot in movement. I think even the Lord was doing some preparation work on the base that, was in process. And so there wasn't as much evangelism happening on the base. There wasn't as much, really there wasn't any evangelism.
No, there's a lot of, it's just not as many people that year, like staff-wise, student-wise.
And the base has been there for so long. There's a lot of events and programs and things.
But not as much, like, outreach, I guess. I mean, they did send things out.
And it was a lull. It wasn't as much engagement in young people. They wanted to see young Norwegians going to missions. They wanted to see...
Yeah, and our school was, like, a lot of older...
Historically, they've sent a lot of missionaries out from this base, and that it was kind of the stories of a decade ago.
It was a lull for sure that year,
and not just that year. I'd say that decade. I mean, the time we were there, time before it, time after it.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't know.
We don't know the whole story, but we immediately felt like, man, we would love to see this kind of thing, like Fire and Fragrance, happen. Like we'd love to see this kind of missions, and we were coming with a media call. The Lord was telling us to do media there. And it was like, is this media work really what we should be doing? Or, what does the base need? Or, man, they're not doing as much as we would love to see them do in the missions category. And there was even some encouragement from them, like, hey, you can help us out with evangelism. Like, I don't know if that's our call to, like, start evangelism. it was a wrestle. And I remember praying. I remember like asking the Lord to stir the base up and do stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, that was the prayer of many on the base as well. And we did establish a communication system there. We put together
Really recruiting communications team.
But it had an underlying.
Hold on.
I got a kid coming in.
I have this on. Can I walk with it out here?
But it's gonna, any sound you make, you just leave it here.
Okay. Leave that.
All of our kids are coming in the door. I wish I could turn the camera so you could see. Just embrace it, you know, we got kids. That's how it works. My volume is low and distorting. Uh-oh. I don't know how to fix that. Is it still bad? Seems like it's good, but maybe it's not. So I don't know how to fix it other than just to keep going. But let me know if you can hear us. Definitely hope you can hear us well. Maybe you put. So anyway, we established the base communication system. Like really, they had a few things set up in an older system, but we came in and worked on the website. We worked on their database that they kept leads in. We worked on their applications. We worked on all of this different stuff, building these systems to get them in a position where they would serve the base. And we started to do this recruiting effort, building up recruiting on Facebook, using Facebook ads, developing a call center, developing a system of follow-up for potential students for their schools. And we worked really hard for a year and 3 or 4 months before we left on that system. And we didn't really see a ton of fruit. We did see some fruit. We saw some a couple of families come, a couple of singles come and join in missions, and several of those are still on the mission field. But it was sort of like not massive fruit. Like it wasn't this amazing, oh my gosh, all these people are coming, which is what I was hoping for. And we worked really hard actually to recruit Norwegians because that was a part of the desire of the base. The vision of the base was to see Norwegians go into missions. It was really hard to see Norwegians. We struggled to get Norwegians to come to the base. And the Lord told us to come to Kansas City in the summer of 2019. In the spring of 2020, we came to America and COVID happened. And there's all kinds of just wonkiness around the world. Obviously, you guys all lived through that. But one of the interesting effects that it had was tons of Norwegians who were in missions with YWAM in other places went back to Norway, and they actually went back to many of them the base that we were at. And I don't know, I wasn't there, but the sense I get was that infrastructure that we helped build up and some of that spiritual, the prayers and the seeking. And then there was even some shifts and changes in leadership. It wasn't directly us, but it came through some of our conversations and like our process there. All of that kind of laid this groundwork for a bunch of young Norwegians, many of them from Fire and Fragrance, to come to Norway, to our base. And now our base has a thriving evangelism ministry. There are teams that are traveling all over the country in buses, doing, worship nights and sharing the gospel in schools and doing evangelism.
I don't even know.
We're not there. We're just hearing reports.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
And there's also a new shift on the base, a new strength in the discipleship training school. The DTS was taken over by a new leader who's just incredible while we were there. And I honestly don't know what's all going on there. Some of you guys watching this video, maybe from there, are like, you can tell us in the comments what's happening or where we're getting this wrong. But that wasn't like we did that in per se. Like we didn't make that happen.
No.
But we obeyed the Lord, and the Lord had this ability to do something through us that maybe is exactly what he was doing or exactly what he wanted to do, but we couldn't have made that happen. And I'm again judging this saying, well, that wasn't really us, or all these different things. But the reality is that God's using his body together. And what if our part in establishing the communication systems in some of our conversations with leadership and building the movement of prayer for reignition of missions, what if God used that and we're seeing now a reignition of missions in Norway and young people coming to Christ? They're seeing people come to Christ, dozens of people coming to Christ because of this season of prayer and season of wrestling, season of plowing, that looking back on it, we played a role in it. We had a part in it. And we can sit here and judge that, but I felt like the Lord was saying, speak to my faithfulness. God was faithful to bring us there. God was faithful to use us in ways that we know and in ways that we don't know. And it's really his report. It's his faithfulness to do that. And it's cool to see that fruit. And then I was asking the Lord what else. And he said, talk about how I've plowed you. This is a funny thing. The Lord told me when we were in Norway that he was going to plow me. That there was going to be this process of breaking up the soil and stirring up things. The kid's struggling.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's going to work.
I don't know if it's going to work.
Maybe he could sit in the corner in here.
Well, no, but if he does, then Elijah is not going to stay in his room. So I turned the audio.
5-year-old and 2-year-old.
I turned the audio Bible on.
Yeah, I can hear him crying.
Yeah.
But yeah, what I'm talking about now is how the Lord worked in me in the process of, I've gone through school. The Lord's been doing a ton of refining in me, a ton of processing in me, freeing me from stuff, breaking through lies. Mm-hmm. And that's what he said he was going to do with us going to Norway.
Before we even went to Norway.
And honestly, it feels a little bit selfish to say that's the fruit or that's good fruit, but like, I believe in the work that God has for us to do. And the beginning of that work was this preparation. Like we weren't going to get to where the Lord's leading us without going through it. Like looking back on it now, that's super clear to me.
Yeah.
And we had to say yes to that process. It's not always what you want to say yes to. It's not always like tons of fruit externally, but it's the groundwork, being healthy so that you have seeds to sow, having fruit in your own life. And that's really been what it is. And that's the faithfulness of the Lord. And then I asked, what other stories do we tell? And there's several stories we've told on here before, but the Lord bringing us to Kansas City, he really made it clear we were supposed to move here. And looking back on it, it's so obvious that it was him, that he was really telling us, this is your next stop. And
down to a lot of really specific details too. It was that at the time didn't make sense.
Well, like it felt like we were quitting our job, quitting missions, quitting living overseas.
Overseas missions.
And coming here and leaving our team behind, leaving this effort we were doing behind. But the Lord made it clear, this is what I'm leading you to do. And right after we announced, right before we came here, our son was born, needing a bunch of surgeries. Yeah. And we would have needed to move back to the States.
At that point, if we weren't planning on it, we would have had to, no matter what.
And that story underpins God's leadership of what's going on, because he didn't just bring us back here in a way to prepare us for surgeries or to help our family survive. He actually was bringing us to the next stop in our journey. I mean, we could have moved a lot of places. We probably would have moved back to Texas, but he knew that the vision of this place, he knew that the vision he's given us, that there's this connection there, And being here in Kansas City, there's an emphasis on missions, on the Great Commission, on prayer that has been essential to what God is calling us to in the future, what's next for us. And I mean, there's a course that I took with the base leader here, Mark Anderson, that has completely changed the way I look at missions, completely changed the way I'm approaching missions.
Well, and family.
Everything, Christianity. And that played out perfectly. Like, I was in such a mess of a state. And the Lord brought us here.
Like, plop, here you go.
And it not only like for me, but also like the partnerships and the engagement here.
Yeah.
I've been able to work with different groups that are here on the base that have just been like perfectly aligned for where God's got us going. It's like the Lord knew where we needed to be for our family, for Elijah. He knew where we needed to be for our vision, our purpose, and he told us to come here. That was his faithfulness in bringing us here. And then once we got here, I mean, we were in a rough state as a family. We were struggling. I was struggling as a parent. I was struggling as a Christian, as a missionary, asking questions about everything. And in addition to the Lord answering those questions with the base, with the teaching, he also like provided a house for us here.
Oh, he provided a lot of things. Not just a house, but the house is the big one.
But providing the house, what that did, it actually had a meaning in itself, but it like was a sign from him, like, you're supposed to be here. Like, we didn't have the money. We didn't have a way to get a loan. And the Lord had asked me to do it. And within 60 days, had closed on this house that we're in and moved in. But like, a house is something of a grounding thing. Like, it's a indication from God, you're supposed to be here in Kansas City. This is the perfect house for us. It was so much obvious. It was obviously the Lord that we're supposed to be here.
We had never bought a house before. So this is our first house we bought too, which I felt was significant because, you know, like, we lived a long time in Abilene and we never bought a house.
Totally.
You know.
But it also, I don't know if you can hear our kids screaming in the background. They're going after it. But we got 6 of you guys watching. Write down in the comments where you're watching from, because I'm really curious. And thank you guys for joining us. Such a good testimony. Incredible to see God's confirmation, and he provided a house. Yeah, so the house thing was like the actual provision, right? Where we have a place to live now. But it also did something in my heart. I was saying, God, we don't need a house. We can rough it. We can live, in this challenging. We were in a rough rent place. Guys living underneath of us. It was rough. And the Lord said, ask me. And so I asked him, and the Lord provided it. And it was a sign of God's abundance, but it was also a sign of like, are you settling for something less than what God has for you? Are you willing to do with less because you think it's like holier, or you're sacrificing, and that's a good thing to sacrifice, and you're like blessed by sacrificing? No, the Lord is blessed by faith. Like, the Lord is blessed when we say, God, I will say yes to you. I'll do what you are asking. And when the Lord wants to give you a house, you say yes. You receive in faith. And then you begin to look at the rest of your life and say, where am I not walking in faith? Like, there's the faith in how we look at the stories and we look at our purpose and say, are we accomplishing something? Well, in the eyes of faith, yes. In the eyes of faith, I can see God's faithfulness. I can see signs of God's leadership. But it's also in the question of, are you expecting things that seem unnecessary? Are you willing to say yes to things that don't make sense? And the house actually shifted my heart. I was like, wait a minute. We need to say yes, and we need to expect of the Lord that the leadership of our lives is not based on what makes sense or based on what is reasonable. It's based on what the Lord's leading us to do. It's based on faith. And that's what healthy missions, that's what a healthy family looks like. And it really was amazing in that space to find ourselves saying yes to the Lord and him blessing us for it. And man, this has been a hard 2.5 years in Kansas City. It's been a hard 5 years, but the Lord has been giving us these indications like, I'm with you, I'm leading you. You are like in my path, in my story. Don't give up. Don't stop believing what I've said to you. Keep saying yes to me. Keep trusting me, leaning on me. And we, by his grace, like, that's all we've got at this point. And he's been so faithful. Like, he's really met us in that place every single time. I'm reading some comments here. Needed to hear this. We are missionaries and have been praying for housing. God's response may not be the same for us as for you, but we too are waiting for a confirmation from him. Sound is much better when you turn on and speak the other direction. You could easily back away or move your mic back. Western Pennsylvania. All right. Is this better if I hold my mic? Can you hear me better now? That's awesome. For the Barreto family in Colombia, God, we just pray that you would meet them with provision for their house. In Jesus' name, we pray that you would make it clear what the pathway is ahead for them and that you would provide. And I pray grace for them to obey you in other areas. Help them say yes to you in everything, Lord, and remind them of anything that is significant or important for them to grasp or say yes to you in, Lord. Yeah. So I was talking about the house and how it shifted me and the way I'm.
Yeah.
So the last 5 years, I mean, we've seen, and I was saying this earlier, we've seen people come to Christ. We've seen millions of views on TikTok. We've seen people come into missions. We've seen people's lives change through DTS. And we've had connections to those things, or some of those things are directly us. But really the fruit of the last 5 years is in the faithfulness of God and him leading us. And I'm really excited about what's ahead. There are some really cool things that are coming out of these 5 years. That plowing has, there's been a lot of digging into questions about, like, what is missions? How do we actually become effective in missions? And he's telling us to start a YouTube channel, an online ministry to focus on media. And there's so much that he's done in us. And I've been sort of just letting it happen to me, letting it happen in our family first. But there's so much that is coming ahead. And it's the faithfulness of God. And if you're a partner of ours and you're watching this, you have a part in the faith journey with us. And Paul said, I don't care if someone else judges me. I don't even judge myself. My conscience is clear, but what matters is what the Lord says, how the Lord judges what I do. And if you're with us as a partner, you're a partner with us in faith. If you're praying for us, you're a partner with us in faith. And if you're saying yes to the Lord in your journey, you're a partner with him in faith. And we have to trust him with the fruit. I think we wrestle with being a good steward. Like, are we doing the best with what he's given us to do? Are we learning how to do it well? Are we leaning into things that can help us be more fruitful? Are we praying and seeking? It's not an excuse. I think that's where I felt like it's an excuse to just say, oh, God's got the fruit figured out. But we have a partnership with him, and we can't just take it and run with it and try and make something happen and say, look what I did. Yeah. It's a partnership.
In some ways, it's easier to do it that way because you can make things happen to a certain degree.
It's hard both ways.
But it's hard both ways. It's better to do it with God than just do whatever makes sense to you.
And he's not on like this timeline of like, I've got 2 years to get something out of you guys. Like,
yeah.
And this is even if you're not in missions full time, you might be thinking, I can't accomplish a lot because I'm not a full-time missionary, or I can't accomplish a lot because I'm not full-time in ministry. The reality is that what God's looking for is not for you to make something happen or for a certain number of hours. He's looking for a yes. He's looking for you to say yes to him, to make your life available to him, to do what he's calling you to do, and to trust him with the process, the preparation, the plowing season to get to this place of the fruit that he wants, the real, sustained, valuable fruit that he wants down the road. And so wherever you are, my encouragement to you is go back and remember what the Lord's told you to do, or if you're already doing it, strengthen yourself in faith, encourage yourself in faith to do what he's told you to do, and trust him to be faithful.
Mm-hmm.
Any final thoughts? Our kids are falling apart.
Yeah, they're still
a little bit of a distraction.
It's the 5-year-old. He's the main one. The 2-year-old is actually completely fine. It's the 5-year-old. All right, I'm gonna leave. Are you like done or?
Yeah, I'm gonna read some comments and then end it.
See you guys.
Drop the mic in your lap. It got loud, I think. I can't see the edge of the comments because the screen is full.
How do I turn this one off since I'm leaving?
It's that loud. I need to work on my audio, apparently.
Yeah. How do I turn this off?
Just hold the button.
Oh.
Thank you guys for joining us, the 4 of you that are here. Y'all have a great night, and we'll see you guys in the next video.